Aloha party people, you are listening to Inside the Desert Oasis Room, episode number 157. This episode is sponsored by Tandawai Rum, the world's largest rum producer and winner of over 170 international medals in the past 4 decades. Check out their webpage at tandawaiusa.com or follow them on Facebook or Instagram at tandawaiusa. This episode is sponsored by the Tiki Bar T-Shirt Club, where their monthly T-shirt designs pay tribute to a Polynesian bar or restaurant from days long past. Each design is available for a limited time and will never be produced again. For the collectors out there, be sure to check out their subscription program, where they offer a discounted 3, 6, or 12-month plan. For more information and to check out this month's shirt, visit tikibartshirtclub.com. Today we chat with Devon Devereaux. Join us inside the Desert Oasis Room as we chat with artist Devon Devereaux on how he got his start in the world of pop surrealism, his influences, his creative process, and what's in store for 2020. As always, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did bringing it to you. If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a good rating. Doing so helps people find the show and helps boost our presence. Also, subscribing makes it easier for you to follow our adventures, and subscribers always get new releases first. You can find previous episodes at our website, desertoasisroom.com, as well as links to our social media, along with links to our guests' websites and their social media. And if you'd like to leave us a tip, click on the tip jar. Alrighty. Here's my conversation with my friend Devon Devereaux.
Inside the Desert Oasis Room.
Hello.
Devon.
Adrian, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Aloha. Happy Aloha Friday.
Happy Aloha Friday.
Thanks for joining the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it so much. I've been wanting to talk to you about your art. And, you know, I kind of find it weird that we've both been in this tiki thing for a while, and I only recently met you last summer.
Yeah. I don't know. I always feel like I'm kind of on the fringe of things, I guess. But
okay,
still in the world, but always kind of on the on the out, I don't know, on the outskirts.
Kind of like on the outer edge, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, I dig your stuff.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to have you on the podcast. Let's start from the beginning. Let's start with your background. For our listeners that aren't familiar with your work, tell us a little bit about this type of art you do and your background, how you got started and all that.
Sure. Okay. I'm an artist, living in San Diego. I would say a lot of my art is kind of pop surrealism, with a lot of tiki, a lot of retro horror, and kind of a sliding scale of everything in between. I'm from Flint, Michigan originally. Went to art school in Michigan, and then moved to the West Coast about 21 years ago. And but yeah, there's no tiki happening in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
except for very, very recently, I went back and there's like a tiki restaurant right next to where my parents lived, about a mile away. So
tiki it's working its way around the country.
For sure.
Yeah. So how did you get started in art, though? Was it something that you always did as a kid, or did something influence you?
I've always been obsessed with comic books, since I was really young. And, I've always wanted to write and draw comics, when I was younger.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and that was kind of my main focus when I was a teenager. I thought I might either want to get into filmmaking or into making comic books and being a storyteller. And I took some filmmaking classes and found out how much compromise was involved, how much sit around and wait, how much you have to compromise and wait for other people before you can actually get your vision seen. But with comics, you can just do everything that you need to do in a room, and you don't have to wait for anybody's input. You don't have to wait for somebody to tell you can or can't do it. You just kind of do it, and you figure out a way to get it out there.
Now, were you collecting comics?
Oh yeah. I have a ridiculously large comic book collection to this day. Yeah, huge.
And you're still collecting to this day?
Not as much. I back a lot of Kickstarters, and then I'll run into people that I know at the comic book shows. But as far as all the mainstream comics go, they hit the reset button too many times for me, where they kind of reset the continuum, and I kind of just checked out after a while.
So, in the 80s, I was a big comic book collector, and I don't know if it was the same time that you were collecting, but I really got into it for the art, because that was kind of the time where comic books took a turn and the artist became like really prominently featured on the books,
Oh,
so
for sure.
One of the guys that I really fell in love with his art was Todd McFarlane, and he was drawing Spider-Man in this really unconventional way, and it just really kind of interested me. And there's a lot of this crossover with the art styles with those comic book artists, and then like you say, you call your art pop surrealism, right? And so they do a lot of that style of art as well. And
I'd say one of my biggest influences is 70s horror comics. So things like the House of Mystery, Tomb of Dracula, old Gene Colan, Bernie Wrightson. That's the stuff I really really love.
Wow.
And, so I'll still buy like a big omnibus book of some old like Vault of Horror, or, kind of the 1950s classic EC. And so before I really got into Tiki and kind of discovered that world, I was really obsessed with all that. And I actually put out a couple anthologies called Tales of Hot Rod Horror. It was all like supernatural hot rod comics. And but Tiki was also kind of a part of that world, like that 1950s post World War II.
So is that how you found your way into Tiki? Just kind of the crossover stuff, or was there a specific
it's kind of one of those
entrance?
things. It was always there, but I never really put the pieces together. From when I was really young, I loved Scooby Doo when they went to Hawaii, and there was the Beware of the Tiki God, and of course there was the classic Brady Bunch episode.
Sure,
and,
yeah.
The Tiki. And Enchanted Tiki Room at Disneyland. So the pieces were always kind of there, but I didn't really know that there was a whole subculture around it until much later in life. And then, it kind of slowly started seeping its way into my work. I used to live in Portland, and there's a really great tiki bar up there called Hale Pele. And I became really, good friends with the owner at the time. And so the first tiki work I started doing was for that, for the bar. And so, I did their menu illustrations and did their all the art for their logo and their T-shirts and everything for a while. It's not what it currently is, but it was kind of like the second wave of art that they did.
Okay, where's your influence coming from with the style of your art? Man,
so I would say probably the biggest art influence on me ever is a guy named Stephen Gamble. And he was the one that originally did the Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which they recently did the Guillermo del Toro produced movie last year.
Okay.
But the original art for those books is probably to this day the biggest single influence on anything that I've done. I'd also say Mark Davis, who designed a lot of the Disneyland art from Pirates of the Caribbean, Haunted Mansion, the Country Bear Jamboree. And, his style of art is just, all of my favorite stuff, the Haunted Mansion, is all Mark Davis, but that's a huge one. Anything from Disney's Haunted Mansion. I really love that whole kind of 70s horror aesthetic we talked about earlier, like things like Night Gallery. I don't know if you ever saw the Night Gallery show. There was a different painting at the beginning.
I know the name Night Gallery, but I just don't recall.
Yeah, it was by Rod Serling, who created the Twilight Zone. That was his follow-up show in the 70s, but it launched the careers of Steven Spielberg and a lot of, and then that was the first thing Leonard Nimoy ever got to direct, was a Night Gallery episode. But there was one guy that did all of the paintings at the beginning of every episode. His name was Thomas Wright, and he had like all these kind of like crazy, trippy 70s horror paintings. But
I'm gonna have to look that up. Is his work published in a book or anything like that, or is it?
They're actually working on a book right now.
Okay.
And I think I don't know if it's out yet, but I can't wait to get a copy of that one for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're throwing out a bunch of names that I'm gonna jot all these down and look them up.
Yeah. So I'll keep going. Dave McKeon, is a fantastic comic book artist and illustrator. He did all the covers for the Sandman comic books in the 90s. Glenn Barr, who's a Detroit artist, he's been a huge influence on my art. He's another big pop surrealist. Kind of came out of that big juxtapose era of artists that hit in the late 90s and early 2000s. He was a background painter on Ren and Stimpy. Okay. And now he's kind of mostly just focusing on his own gallery work.
Wow.
And then, of course, Shag. Shag was another one of those guys that came out of that whole camp of, Mark Ryden and the Piz and all those guys. But I'd say, like, if there's a big melting pot, I mean, those are kind of the biggest ones I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, yeah. I know what's going to happen, too, is after we finish this recording, you're going to remember a few more names. And you're going to say, I should have mentioned this guy.
At Comic-Con, that was one of the questions that I just was not prepared for, and I just completely drawn a blank, so I made sure ahead of time that I knew who to throw out.
There you go. I'm going to look up all of these artists and see what they're creating. And, along that line, just talking about all of these different styles of art, your art also meshes a number of these different styles and genres, right? From comic book superheroes to Universal monsters. I call those classic monsters the Universal monsters because,
for sure,
like Universal Pictures, right? So I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, I've seen Universal monsters in some of your art. I believe the werewolf, and I think I've seen the classic Dracula in there, and even to Elvis. So having said all of that, and all those different styles, is there a favorite thing that you like to create? Is there one that you gravitate more towards?
Man, it always kind of just comes and goes in waves. It almost seems kind of cyclically during the year, when summertime's around, that's when I really kind of focus on the tiki world and creating more of the tropical art. Okay. But then as soon as Tiki Oasis is done, my brain just immediately switches into Halloween mode.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I go for the darker.
Yeah. So when you're creating this stuff, so what's your approach? So how do you get creative? Like, what gets the creative juices flowing?
Well, I mean, at any time, I have just a huge list of things that I want to do. I'm really slow. I'm like an incredibly slow artist, and I also have a 9-to-5 day job. I make Halloween costumes for my day job.
Do you really?
And I do, yeah. There's a company up in Poway called Disguise, so I create a lot of artwork that gets printed on Halloween costumes.
Oh, you're kidding me! That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not bad for a day job. And
especially if that's like kind of
everything else you see is when I'm trying to squeeze it in.
Yeah, that's down your alley too, with like the monster stuff, right? Or unless you're like creating stuff too, like like the guy that's like looks like a taco, right? Or,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, we
do a little bit of everything, like I guess what I'm getting at too is that as an artist or anybody that does anything creative, right? There's sometimes creative blocks, right? Writer's block.
Honestly, I don't have that problem because my brain works 100 times faster than my hands or the rest of myself. So I'm always kind of flooded with way too many ideas and just not enough time to execute, even a quarter of them.
Do you have like a little book or something that you put sketches in or jot down ideas?
Yeah. I keep like a sketch, like I've got like a little mini sketchbook in my wallet that I'll pull out every now and then.
Oh, okay.
And then, I'm also just kind of have an endless, thing of notes on my iPhone where I'm just constantly writing stuff down all the time.
Yeah.
Just doing a big brain dump.
That's a good thing because sometimes getting out of a rut can be really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for somebody that's creative and depends on their creativity to make a living,
For sure.
Yeah. Is there anything that you've worked on that stands out in your mind, whether it's like, it could be a project or an event or an art piece?
Yeah, I would say, in the tiki world, I think a lot of people know me for a piece that I did several years ago with Vincent Price in the Tiki Caves from the Brady Bunch episode.
Yeah.
And I actually was at a horror convention, and that was when I was just starting to do some work for Halle Pele. And I was got to sit next to Victoria Price, who's Vincent Price's daughter.
Oh, how cool.
And yeah, and so she had seen what I, seen my work, and she said, hey, I love your horror stuff. I love your tiki stuff. You should do something with my dad, from when he was on the Brady Bunch. I said, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. So she commissioned me to do a portrait of her father, and so it was officially licensed.
I saw that.
So that was one of my early pieces.
It's amazing.
But yeah.
Speaking of Vincent Price, this came up recently. I was at the Tonga Hut maybe 2 weekends ago for the Tiki Central 20th anniversary party.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing came up about, there was this thing when I was a kid that you could bake an apple, some kind of a kit where you could bake an apple into a shrunken head.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then somebody posted a picture of the package or something, or the ad on my Facebook profile, and said, is this the apple shrunken head kit you're talking about? And I said, that's it. And it had Vincent Price on it. And I thought, it just jogged my memory because I had forgotten that Vincent Price was part of that. And then the commercial was instantly playing in my head now of Vincent Price, right? He's such an iconic figure for that classic horror genre.
Yeah, he was on the cover of the board game for Hangman also. Just he's randomly there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Wow. So
he would kind of just show up everywhere in the 70s.
yeah. He was all over the place. And the Brady Bunch thing too was, the creepy, crazy guy in the cave, living in the cave with all the tikis,
Yeah, single best episode of Brady Bunch, the best episode of the Muppets. Anytime he showed up, he added value.
Yeah. Have you ever created a piece of art that you got maybe really attached to and you couldn't let it go?
Not really. No, I
No?
don't really get precious about any of my originals.
That's good.
I need money. So if somebody says, hey, I really like that piece, then I'm there. I don't think I have one piece of artwork that I would not sell.
Right.
I have high resolution backups of everything. So if I ever need to make a reproduction, I have that.
Okay.
But, it's like when I die, I can't take any of this stuff with me. So it's like I might as well give it to somebody that really, really wants to, appreciate it. And, I've met like a handful of collectors over the years that, they'll kind of just keep, commission me to do, different pieces for their collection over and over. So no, it's all about sharing it and getting it out there into the world. It doesn't do you any good if it just sits around in your garage.
What about like one-off pieces? I mean, as an artist, I'm sure that you've done things that there's only one of one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm excited to get rid of it. Like I'm excited to be like, all right, this thing that had value to me also has huge value to someone else, and I can't believe they're willing to spend that kind of money on something like that.
And maybe sometimes too, you just get tired of looking at it, right?
Sure. Yeah. No, I always feel like I've tricked somebody. If I've sold a painting for more than $1,000, I'm like, oh my god, I feel sorry for that
like
guy.
You've tricked somebody. That's funny. I can see where you would come from that. But I guess what I'm getting at too is, one time I was talking to John Mulder about what he does, right? He makes tiki mugs and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he said, he goes, some of these mug projects, I am ready to just like move on to the next one. I don't ever want to see that mug again. Because, he sculpts it and molds it and then glazes it and fires it. And he's like, there'll be hundreds of pieces, and he's just looking at them all day, every day. And he says, I'm excited about changing to something different,
Yeah, because after a while, all you see is the mistakes, and when somebody else looks at it, they're seeing something different. But it's like, if you're with it, if you're staring at something for 40 hours, then all you see is the imperfections after a while.
Dude, I've never thought of that. Yeah. Wow. I know that you do a lot of graphic stuff. Is there a medium that you haven't tried yet that you want to try?
Man, I've done a handful of mugs now. I've not really attempted to do any of my own sculpted mugs. I've done a handful. So I did a mug for the Bali High that Monkiki developed. And then I did my second mug with a local sculptor named Robert Maya, who's really awesome. He's the one that did the gigantic gorilla that year at Tiki Oasis, that everybody.
Yeah. Oh, man. What was that made of anyway? That giant gorilla? Was it foam or what was that?
Man, I'd have to ask him. I'm not sure what it all came out of, but he actually used to work at the same costume company as me. And I know all that purple, I think the material, the fabric that kind of covers up most gorilla was all just leftover stuff in the back room at disguise.
Oh, okay.
They let him have.
Yeah, I would think that as somebody that is more accustomed to doing graphics, that actually like getting your hands dirty with clay might be, I don't know what the right word is. Like maybe you're out of your comfort zone there, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, just working three-dimensionally is, because, I've been an oil painter for, 25 years, and that's
oh, really?
Most of my art, if you look at my website, it's mostly oil paintings.
Oh, I didn't know that it was oil paintings.
Well, it's a mix, because I have stuff that I made in Adobe Illustrator, and then original oil paintings, and then airbrush, and so I do a lot of mixed media. I pretty much do everything 2D, but almost nothing 3D.
So let me ask you, as somebody that's been oil painting for decades, what are your thoughts about Bob Ross?
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he's awesome.
Okay. Yeah. I love Bob Ross, and I could watch those episodes all night long. As a matter of fact, I'll put one on YouTube, and I'll go down in a rabbit hole of Bob Ross paintings, and for hours, because it'll autoplay the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one.
Kind of the art instructor I wish I always had,
Right? He seems patient, and he makes it look really easy. But, there was a time when he was criticized for not being a real artist. And I put real artist in quotes, right? I guess like in the 80s, maybe it was even the 70s, when he was at the height of his fame, there were artists that were saying, well, he's not a real artist.
Yeah, I would never say that. I think he's brilliant at his craft, and he's somebody that definitely had mastery over what he did. Sure.
I agree. Yeah. Whenever I watch his stuff, I think, I want to try that. He makes it look really easy. I just haven't.
Well, I think you should.
Yeah. Actually, talking with you about this whole trying the sculpting thing, if you're game to give it a shot, maybe we could work on a project together. So, yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, So, there was a time when I took art classes and I did go to school for art. It was something that I was focusing on at one time. The thing is, the game is, especially with this world that we're in, the bar is set so high. There's so much great talent out there. And, I've done my share of some fun stuff, but I'm too intimidated to show anybody.
No way, man. Well, what was your discipline? Like, what did you do? What do you like to do?
I like to do a bunch of different things. I like to carve and I like to paint, but I really enjoyed painting. I started painting probably, so I should, let me back up. In the 80s, I would draw because the comic book thing. Again, I was drawn to the art in comic books and drew a lot of characters, and I was drawing a lot up until maybe like the mid-90s. I started painting. It was acrylic painting. I've never painted with oils, so I don't even know how it compares to acrylics. But, in the early days of this tiki revival in the early 2000s, I was vending at all the events, and I was selling my art. But, I had a full-time job, and it just kind of felt like I didn't need to do that, because like I had a full-time job, but also because I didn't want to do that because I'd sit behind a table all day, and you know how that feels. Like when you were at Comic-Con, for example, it was slammed, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember seeing an assistant when I went by your booth. I don't know how you could even leave to just use the restroom, I
don't know. I really like it because, creating is something you do in solitude. And
sure.
You're by yourself if I'm working on a painting, I might spend 30 hours on one painting just completely by myself in my head.
It's certainly cathartic and therapeutic, right?
Yeah. But it's like when you're behind the table, you get to share and you get to kind of talk about things and you get to, get feedback. And, that's something that you don't get except for like a very, like whenever you're doing a show. So I really love that part of it.
Yeah. Well, I do enjoy creating stuff. I mean, like I said, I'm a little intimidated about sharing. So, what's going to happen is after this episode comes out, people are going to start PMing me to, hey,
I want to see that.
I want to see.
I would love. No, I'd love to see what you did. I didn't know you did that. Yeah, I'd love to see what you can share.
Most people don't, so and it'll probably stay that way. But
I don't know, man. You're putting it out there. It's all, I mean, art is this time. It's just your art is as good as your butt is in the chair for how many hours you sat in the chair to get it done. And it's, if anybody's ever intimidated, I was like, it's more about time than it is about talent.
Sure, and another thing that I enjoy doing is. Like when people have an art jam and there's a bunch of people that gather, it could be as little as 2 or 3 people to as many as a dozen people, and everybody's kind of being creative in the same room at the same time. That's a lot of fun, Well,
I host, hit me up, man, because we do an art night every Tuesday night down here. So I don't know.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's all different disciplines. So my friend Emily, she makes like animatronic plush, sculptures, and my friend Ashley, who's my she's my creative partner. She's the one that does all my cabana sets. She does all the production and sewing and everything. Yeah, that's Volcano Designs. She'll come over and get some sewing done, and
nice.
Some people are sculptors, some people are working drawing on their iPad. So,
oh, dude, I would love to. I will circle back with you on that because one of the things that I really enjoyed this past couple of months is I've gone to Drew Brophy's art jams. He has it. I don't know if he still has it. It was through the end of the year, but he would have it every Saturday. He'd start at 5 p.m. People would bring just snacks or beer or whatever to share. And then he'd throw all his Posca pens out he'd set up these big tables in his gallery. And and everybody would just kind of, you'd kind of share stuff with the group on the table, and they'd set up a bonfire outside, and inside people would just draw, and it was fun, and then you take a break, you go outside and sit around the bonfire, have a beer, and maybe somebody brought a guitar too, and it was fun.
Yeah, that's the best. I mean, no matter where I've lived, I have to have that weekly check-in, that kind of community. It's really important to me.
Yeah. So you mentioned your cabana sets.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be remiss about not talking about that. Let's mention that because I was impressed by something that I saw at Comic-Con. You were wearing a cabana set there that you had designed. So talk about that.
Yeah, my friend Ashley Meek from Volcano Designs, she does her own custom wear, but her and we are collaborate a handful of times out of the year. And so my line of tiki merchandise is Creepy Tiki. You can go to creepytiki.com to check it all out. But that's just specifically for just the tiki stuff that I do.
Okay.
And so we've got a couple things in the works for this year, but we can do cocktail dresses, cabana sets, just custom shirts, whatever you need, all sizes, everything's all handmade. So you can get pretty much everything custom.
And if somebody wanted to do custom pattern custom artwork on the fabric, do you do that also?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I create the repeat pattern, and then we just print it by the rolls, and then she does all the production work on it. And we, once again, she's one of the other people at Disguise, that I met, who's for the costume company, because I was one of the artists and she was one of the pattern makers, and so that's where we connected.
So Creepy Tiki, that's a great segue to Hot Topic.
Yeah. Once again, it was just a good year, good couple last months. I got hit up by Hot Topic, and they said, hey, we like what you do. Would you be interested in getting your shirts in our store? And I said, yeah, of course. So I ended up working with the Hot Topic team, and just right around Christmas, I have my own store on the Hot Topic website that I curate.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's a really long address. It's hottopic.com/creators/artist/Devon Devereaux. It's probably just easiest if you go to my Instagram or my website to find it.
We'll make it easy for our listeners. I'll put that link. In the description of the podcast so that people can just click on it if they want to go right to that spot. Yeah, but I have a lot of my creepy tiki stuff is up there. I also have my my baboon exorcism T-shirt on there, which has nothing to do with tiki, but people still like that one too. Yeah. So earlier we talked about artists that influenced you. Now that you've got stuff in retail stores and you're doing custom things like clothing, for example, it's probably like a full circle thing. Now you're probably influencing people that you may not even know that you're doing. So that's kind of a cool thing, right? Cool thought
to say that, but one thing that's really cool is I connected with a guy up in Poway, Nathan, and he goes to all the tiki shows, and so he asked if it would be okay if he started taking my art and turning it into carvings, and so he's kind of going to town, like doing his own take on my art
there you go.
Like sculptures. That's pretty sweet.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah, you
should take some of your art and make mugs. Start going down that road, because the mug thing, there's people out there that go mug crazy.
Well, that I do have my first Mondo mug coming out this year.
Oh, I didn't know that. Talk about that.
Yeah, I'm doing a mug with Mondo. So I love a lot of kind of aquatic horror, specifically Lovecraftian aquatic horror, like Cthulhu and the Shadow over Innsmouth and Dagon, and it's kind of like the whole idea is called the Deep Ones, which are like these ancient gods that lived underwater. And so a lot of what I do is kind of like a riff on those archetypes. And so I did a whole series of pieces called the Creep Ones, and it's play on the Deep Ones, and kind of like these underwater like tiki gods. And so Mondo was digging that, so they kind of asked me to create a new custom tiki mug for them, and it's based on that. It's called the Innsmouth Creep, and it's going to be coming out later this year. I don't have the actual date on it yet.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we'll keep an eye out for that too. So before we wrap up, let's give our listeners the addresses to where they can find you online.
Sure. So my main hub for everything is DevonDevereaux.com. So that's DevonDevereaux.com. And that kind of is a big nest for everything that I do. And then there's creepytiki.com, which is just my tiki artwork. And my Instagram handle is @DevonDevereaux. And those are probably the three main spots where you kind of find everything that I do through those.
Very cool. I'm going to circle back with you about not just this art night that you guys do on Tuesdays, but it'd be awesome to do a project together in the future.
I would love that, and
I would love that too.
We need to see more of Adrian's art out in the world, especially these tiki shows. That's what I want to see.
It's going to take a lot of coaxing for that.
I think we can do it. I think the world is ready for it.
I don't know, but I appreciate the encouragement. Hey man, this podcast is about you right now. Let's stop turning in that direction. But hey, I want to say thank you again for being on the show, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Love it.
Yeah. And the next time I'm in San Diego, I'm going to hit you up. I get down there every once in a while, and I don't think I've ever actually got to hang with you in San Diego other than when we were at Comic-Con together.
No, so, yeah, we kind of circled around each other, but we didn't really connect until
Comic-Con was impossible. It was, just walking from the hotel down the sidewalk to the convention center, which is like 100 yards. I think it took me 25 minutes because there was sidewalk traffic, right? And it was bumper to bumper shuffling of the feet, So it
just keeps getting crazier every year.
It was insane.
No end in sight.
Yeah, and then I knew where your booth was, right? And I thought, okay, I'm going to go stop and say hi to Devon. And I couldn't turn down the aisle because the foot traffic was so thick. And I could see the aisle that you're in that I thought, okay, do I stop everybody just so that I could try to it was like being in a concert, where you go where the crowd goes,
And I landed in a ridiculously good spot because I've been doing that show for almost 20 years. And so I keep kind of working my way up to better spots on the floor.
Yeah.
And the spot that I'm in right now, I'm neighbors with the guy right next to me is Chris Sanders, who's the creator of Lilo and Stitch. So
nice.
So once a year, I get to kind of hang out with him and pick his brain for 5 days every summer. And then the guy across from me is Jason Edmiston. He's like one of the world's biggest, most popular illustrators. So it's, I'm in a really cool spot. So those guys drive a ton of traffic into that area.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm glad that I was able to finally get to your booth, but then you were with a customer, so we didn't really get to hang. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm in the same spot every year, so I'll be back there for 2020.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I appreciate again everything, Devon, and you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for the call.
All right. Thanks. Cheers.